I wish Americans would stop talking about my country, actually.
You totally misinformed your hundreds of thousands of subscribers.
Don't talk about my reproductive system, sir. I'm not going to argue that I wasn't born male. I absolutely was. But I would make the argument that I'm not entirely male anymore.
So adult human male is now also a dog whistle.
Let's just really think about this, right? For Women Scotland, this feminist group.
Oh my god, it's me. If someone just does that kind of thing by themselves, oh, I consider myself a woman, but I don't really care if other people call me a man, that's fine.
First of all, I don't think there is such a thing as a co-ed shelter.
Google is free.
It's like, well, what's an excuse for me to not actually deal with the question? And thus not actually give a take.
My joke about how I like to see old hags choke.
Let's say I'm not racist, but I go up to a black person and call them the N-word. People are gonna think I'm racist, even though I think I'm not racist.
Why am I dancing with that trans person?
Trans YouTuber Samantha Lux smears me as bigots. So Brad Polumbo talked about Samantha Lux. Trans YouTube star lashes out at JK Rowling over UK Supreme Court. So I'm guessing it's a continuation of that. So yeah, let's see what Samantha Lux is saying. I think I know a little bit, and I guess we'll get on to what immediate thoughts I had.
Relying on this manipulative language of biological male, right? It's a conservative dog whistle.
I think when you start saying that these kind of phrases like biological male, which clearly just means something in reality, when you start saying that these things are dog whistles and you can't even say that, it's like, well, what can you say? You all are happy to push the thing that sex and gender are different things. Well, then surely you understand that you're a biological male, but now people can't refer to you as that. So how do people refer to your sex? Just male? Well, biological is kind of meaningless, I agree, in that context. But it doesn't make it, like, offensive either. Like, you are what you are. There's nothing wrong with that.
Or I shouldn't say conservative. It's an anti-trans dog whistle.
Not me hopping back into the drama content and doing another response video to a trans YouTuber who lied about me and smeared me as a bigot. Yes, guys, welcome back to my second channel. I wanted to do this over here because I think it'd be slightly diabolical to do a main channel podcast episode about a video of a trans YouTuber responding to a video that I made, responding to her video, responding to JK Rowling. Like, the levels of inception there are a bit much, even for me. But I do want to talk about this because Samantha Lux is a very prominent left-wing transgender YouTuber on this website and in this space. And she just made a video calling me out, calling me a bigot, going after me in all sorts of ways and making some pretty bizarre, factually incorrect statements and some pretty absurd arguments. And I want to walk through them. The context you need to know for all of this is that in the UK, there was a big Supreme Court ruling where basically they ruled that for the purposes of civil rights law, woman referred to biological females, not trans women, which kind of set the stage.
Someone was saying, how is it manipulative? Well, it's manipulative because you're manipulating people into seeing you as a male. Which is a bit strange to say, because that's literally what you are. You know what I mean? Are you not manipulating people in some way into seeing you as a woman instead of a man? And I'd agree if you were to say, well, as long as I'm not hurting anyone, it's kind of a harmless manipulation. But also, is it harmful to call a male person a male? You know what I mean? It goes both ways.
For some things like female only, domestic violence shelters, and these kinds of things. And some degree of sex-segregated spaces, although, of course, this is important to note, trans women were still protected.
Yeah, it's important to remember, if a woman's been, like, abused by a man, they're going to be immediately very fucked up. And the last thing you want to do, potentially, is have them be around men, where they end up getting re-traumatized. It's, like, super important that you protect women from that, when that's what's going on. So if you think that male people should have access to, like, rape shelters and stuff, you're ultimately accepting like a higher risk of something like that happening.
And trans men under the gender identity protections in British civil rights law. Anyway, the YouTuber Samantha Lux made a very angry and hostile video towards JK Rowling, saying that she hopes she chokes and calling her an old hag and spreading a lot of misinformation about the Supreme Court ruling and what actually happened. So I called Samantha out in a video that got a lot of views and got a lot of traction. And I thought I was pretty respectful to Samantha, but just strongly disagreed with a lot of her points. I did use her pronouns. I did use her preferred name. I didn't call her any names or insult her, but she took great issue with my commentary. And I have invited her, by the way, on my channel for a conversation, but she is apparently not interested. And she took great issue with my video and just did a response video that I want to respond to some of the points she makes in great depth. Let's start going through this because it might take a little bit.
Another transphobe has made another video about me. Honestly, a lot of the arguments are very similar, if not exactly the same. Well, I should say arguments. Honestly, there's not many arguments made in this video, but similar to the last time, I figured it could be fun to just have a little giggle, shall we? I mean, hey, if we can't laugh at the haters and laugh at the bigots, what can we do?
It's a very strange way to open your video.
So, wow. She labeled me transphobic in her title, transphobic gay. She called me a bigot and a hater. And this is interesting because all I really did was disagree with her and then say some facts she doesn't like that upset her. But there was no hate. In fact, I kind of clarified at multiple points in that video that I have a lot of compassion for genuine trans people.
Yeah, most people, when they have like a video made about them, they're not going to talk to that person. They'll say a bunch of stuff about that person that their chat will, or their audience will completely agree with without any like pushback. And each person will go their separate ways, both thinking each other is literally Hitler. It's great. My beef with Sam started where one breath there was, we as women should have each other's backs, all women. Then did a video, why date trans? Giving 10 reasons why trans are better. I haven't seen that one, to be clear. I can't say I'm a fan of Samantha Lux myself. She shows kind of signs of occasionally understanding some concept that is like broader than herself in terms of like trans rights and like trans rights v women's rights. But she almost always like completely kneecaps a point straight afterwards.
People, I see them getting a lot of hate right now and I don't support that. But I'm a bigot now because I disagree with her. It really is. I mean, if you can make a video discussing this topic, responding to somebody's arguments, criticizing them, pushing back on them, using their pronouns, not calling them any names, any of this, and still get labeled a bigot simply because of statements I made that, like the fact that trans women are technically men, that's what she cites as
yeah, saying trans women are men isn't actually transphobic. Sorry about it.
Proof that I'm a bigot, then we've lost the plot. And
if you're going to say that it's bad to call someone a man, then you obviously think that there's something bad about men in general.
Words like transphobe officially mean nothing. If it doesn't actually require any hate or animus, but just mere disagreement, then you are officially just weaponizing that term and overusing it and in the process diluting its significance. So what do I know? I'm just a hater and a bigot.
You're mad at me for being mad at JK Rowling, one of the world's most notorious TERFs, one of the world's most notorious anti-trans activists.
Jesus Christ.
I'm not sorry. Like, I'm not.
Well, I wasn't mad.
I mean, going on about JK Rowling these days is just the dumbest thing ever. Like, just give up. Just end this stupid fucking war that you will never win. Like, she'll die one day. That's about the best that will happen from your corner. From my corner, I don't know. I agree with a bunch of stuff she said. I think she goes quite far and has done for a few years. But it's a little understandable when you start out saying, well, sex is real. You actually look at the kind of shit she was initially saying and the response that got, you know what I mean? It's kind of understandable that that kind of person ends up quite extreme. So I don't know. I think the best way is to just fucking stop talking about her if you're trans. Like, you don't have to like her. You don't have to agree with anything she says. But why make her into this like pinata? Why make her into this effigy that you can't stop fucking throwing matches at yet it still never sets alight somehow? It's just pathetic.
Mad at Samantha, but I did criticize her because
I don't like Sam's channel. I'm not sure Brad sees it for what it is. How do you mean?
Because she called JK Rowling an old hag, said she wanted her to choke, belittled the concerns of rape victims and domestic abuse victims who want female-only spaces, and spread misinformation about a UK Supreme Court ruling. So yeah, that's valid criticism. I mean, this next clip will show you what I mean when I say that, like, Samantha's video was deeply flawed and well worthy of criticism.
Let's just really think about this, right? For Women Scotland, this feminist group fighting for equal rights for women, right? Campaigned to get protections taken.
Nodding along with this. I don't know why it's so funny to me. Oh my God, it's me.
Away from trans women, right? The Equality Act is a non-discrimination act.
Oh yeah, so right. Yeah, well done, me. It's a good point, me. You're not beating the narcissist allegations anytime soon, just saying.
Equal rights for women, right? Campaigned to get protections taken away from trans women, right?
No, they campaigned for woman to mean women in the Equality Act. It's not taking away protections from trans people. Trans people have their own separate protections, that being the gender reassignment section. of the Equality Act. A man still has rights. A woman still has rights. If you switch to the other one, you're still your sex because you can't actually change sex. But you have rights based on that as well. So if anything, you kind of still have more, like, there are more sections that apply to you.
The Equality Act is a non-discrimination act. They tried to get us removed. They did get us removed. But
That's not true. How can you lie like this? And she's nodding along to herself. Maybe just don't talk about my fucking country, you know what I mean?
that was their goal, to get us out of a non-discrimination act. If that doesn't tell you the type of people they are, I don't know what will.
So first things first, this is just factually incorrect. Trans people did not get removed from the Equality Act. They are still covered and still protected under the gender identity provision.
Gender reassignment.
I'm sorry, but I just have
I wish Americans would stop talking about my country, actually.
to roll my eyes at this idea that how they disagree with an aspect of discrimination law, how that tells you everything you need to know about them. They must be evil. Actually, no, it's okay to disagree with a particular element of a complicated civil law, and it doesn't make you an evil meanie.
Okay, love the mocking right off the...
He just kind of, he was like essentializing. It's better to zero in on what exactly they're saying. They're removing us from the Equality Act. Well, clearly they're not, you know.
Me putting my hands down because I'm like, I don't want to be mocked again. It's really unfortunate that like members of the community are doing this now. Like I remember
Members of the community. He doesn't owe you anything because he's gay and you're trans. I guess you're both gay men, technically, but like, come on, bro. Members of the community. What community?
a few years ago when it was that other girl that made the TERF video to me. It was, you know, she wasn't in the community. She didn't have that understanding of what it's like to be queer and what it's like to be on the outside. But he does. First of all, I didn't say that they
Is he queer? Do you get to say that someone else is queer? Don't you have to call yourself that?
were evil or mean. That's not what I said. I said that it says a lot about their character, which it does. Trans people
Okay, what does it say about their character then?
may still be protected in some ways under this non-discrimination law.
Meaning that you lied? Like, you just got it wrong, no? I still can't fucking track. Okay.
I did forget to put that in my video. That's very true. Thank you so much, Brad, for bringing that up. But like
Well done.
you're pointing out, they won't be protected in other ways, like inclusion into domestic shelters.
So there's a lot
Well, they're still able to get inclusion into domestic shelters. Just not ones that are women only. Like, there's reasons for these kind of things happening. Like I said, women are much more likely to be victimized by men. So if a man comes in and everyone's saying, oh, it's okay, they identify as female, that traumatized woman might not see them as a trans woman or a woman. They might see them as a man. Their mere presence might cause a fucking serious problem for them because they've just been like traumatized.
there. First and foremost, I was kind of taken aback at the suggestion that me doing a caricature of her viewpoint, which I'll do, like where I'm talking to myself and I'll say, oh, they say this or this, is like me mocking her.
Yeah, I mean, the other problem is, as much as he's like essentializing and is kind of mocking, it was kind of mocking her. At the same token, Samantha Lux does that to other people. She essentializes people all the time. Like, is it okay both ways or is it okay only one way?
Her for being queer or something, you're just playing the victim. No, I do that all the time to all sorts of people. It has nothing to do with you being trans or queer or whatever. I get it. You just are obsessed with being a victim. That's fine, but there's no there, so I'm not buying that whatsoever. Secondly, I love how she just breezed over the fact that she spread total misinformation about the UK Supreme Court ruling.
Like, she at least admitted that she left that out, but it wasn't just leaving a piece of information out. It was literally saying they're trying to take us out of the Equality Act. If that's what they were trying to do, they failed. And you don't have information, you don't have evidence that that's what they're trying to do. Like, do they actually want there to be no cutout for gender reassignment? I'm not hearing anyone saying that. You could argue that they want to get rid of, like, what is it, gender reassignment certificates or whatever. Which, I mean, the problem is people are being allowed to, like, lie on their birth certificate if that's what they want to do. There's an argument against that. But, like, the hope is, that there'd still be protections on the basis of, like, being trans. Like, being trans is a thing that is known in society. So if you're going to discriminate against someone on that basis, that is wrong and should be stopped as best as possible. How do they expect trans protection if they're trying to be included under the same laws of actual women? Well, it kind of comes across like some of them want to go above and beyond. We have to be treated in every single way as women, but also protected as trans women. So they kind of want more rights than anyone else in a way. That's how it comes across.
You're anti-trans.
And they have that, you know? And yeah, they have those kind of things. Like, if you question, like, trans identity, you can lose your job over that shit. What other group? What other group does that like apply to? Because bear in mind, questioning like an ideology is not really the same as like being racist or like being sexist or something. Having a different opinion on something that is very subjective.
She said in her original video that feminist activists had gotten trans women removed from protections from the Equality Act in the UK, their anti-discrimination law. That is untrue. They are still protected under the gender identity
Yeah, she did kind of breeze over it, I guess.
provisions. So they are still protected from discrimination in things like housing and employment and so on. But there will now be the opportunity to have some female-only spaces like shelters and other things. She's like, oh, well, I forgot to mention that. No, it's like a huge deal, actually. You totally misinformed your hundreds of thousands of subscribers by leaving out a key
The other problem is, if you lie like that in a video, and then there's a small little part of this current video where you correct it, how many people are even seeing that correction? Or even listening to the correction? They've already taken the lie and run with it. Like, what is it? The truth is like, a lie is like halfway around the world by the time the truth has put his pants on or something.
crucial fact to all of this. And then impugning people.
What I don't understand is, how is this all a problem? Trans people have been using the toilet forever, and 20 years ago, no one cared. Well, 20 years ago, trans people were much less visible. There weren't these campaigns like Trans Day of Visibility. There wasn't the same focus on trans people within like the LGBT. For the most part, trans people wanted to be stealth and blend in with society. So people largely didn't care. But it's kind of, first off, there's been this massive push towards trans visibility, which means that you're getting the good and bad of that visibility. More people understand trans people, but more people that aren't going to understand and don't like trans people are also going to see them. So visibility is a double-edged sword. The second part is, we've moved the focus away from being stealth and fitting in with society, fitting in with your new gender. We've moved away from that towards identity, where I identify as this, therefore I am. So there's less impetus to care about things like looking like a woman, like blending in. So what you're getting now is a much more well-known group of people who aren't actually trying to resemble women in any way sometimes, still feeling like they are entitled to use women's spaces, women's toilets, stuff like that. And some women are just not comfortable with that, and probably weren't comfortable with that back then either. But trans was less visible and less common. Does that make sense?
As evil. And then she even added in the little text on the screen, but like.
And the thing is, the toilets are like the easiest one. I think, me personally, and I'm a male person, I understand this. Like, I don't think it's such a big deal if you look like a woman to use the female toilets if you're not female. If no one's going to notice you, it's probably fine. And the same goes vice versa. But we can't just talk about toilets. It's not just about toilets. It's about locker rooms. It's about rape shelters. It's about prisons. It's about sports teams and stuff like that. And like, I can kind of steelman the trans side for like bathrooms and stuff. But let's think about like prisons, for example. Like, should male people really be allowed in like women's prisons? When you start seeing people that are like impregnating women, like using that opportunity to get up to all kinds of things.
They basically are, because they disagree with you about an aspect of civil rights law. I still find that incredibly, incredibly intellectually arrogant and bad faith, as if these laws and the conflicting rights scenarios they entail aren't complicated or nuanced, and anyone who disagrees with you must be bad. The world is not, in fact, that simple. But intellectual consistency is clearly not Samantha's strong suit.
And personally, I don't know, I'm just of the belief that feminism is inherently trans-inclusive. It's inclusive of everybody. You know, the definition of feminism is what?
I don't see how it would be necessarily when trans kind of hinges on enforcing certain gender like stereotypes. And feminism is meant to be about reducing those, seeing gender as like an oppressive force in society. So either you're kind of reinforcing stereotypes by dressing a certain way and presenting yourself a certain way and saying, oh, because of that, I'm a woman. Or you're not even doing that. You're just colonizing womanhood. You're a man saying, well, I'm a woman now, and not even bothering to look like one, you know what I mean? The way I look at it when, from transitioning for a medical condition to where now it's more of a cyberpunk body modification mindset for the sake of it. Yeah, I mean, those people still exist. Those people with gender dysphoria that like transition and just try and blend in with society, they still exist. But you've got more and more people with different mindsets And it's fine to have a different mindset. It's when you start forcing it on the rest of society. It's when you start being a male person who makes no effort whatsoever to come across like a woman. And then if you call them a man, you're a bigot. It's that kind of thing where it becomes a problem, you know? If someone just does that kind of thing by themselves, oh, I consider myself a woman, but I don't really care if other people call me a man, that's fine. You're a bit delusional in a lot of people's eyes, but at least you're not forcing that on other people, you know? Oh, that's okay, Kat's #1 fan. Listen, I understand people have different perspectives. I'd rather people ask if they have a question.
Equality of all the sexes, equality for all sexes. If you're not fighting for everybody's rights, you're not a feminist. Sorry to break it to you, babe.
So this was just
You don't get to say that. I'm sorry, man. You don't get to say that.
well, consistency is clearly not Samantha's strong suit.
And personally, I don't know. I'm just of the belief that feminism is inherently trans-inclusive. It's inclusive of everybody, you know.
Yeah, you don't really make a case of that. You don't make a case for that. You're just saying, well, it's inclusive for everyone. Why? Because it's about redressing imbalances. That doesn't mean that it's about redressing imbalances in favor of males, men, you know?
The definition of feminism is what? Equality of all the sexes, equality for all.
I mean, the whole point of feminism is uplifting women because it's women that have been typically disadvantaged. Women couldn't vote or own property like 100 years ago.
Sexes. If you're not fighting for everybody's.
And equality of the sexes means bringing up women to match men. But you're a man. You can't just say you're a woman and then be part of that. That doesn't really make any sense, you know?
Rights, you're not a feminist. Sorry to break it to you, babe.
So this was just strange to me.
And yeah, you definitely don't get to say that. You don't get to tell people whether they're a feminist or not. When you're a man appropriating womanhood, that's completely cooked. You don't get to say that. And that's gonna be taken very insultingly by plenty of women, you know what I mean? You want to blend in with women, you probably shouldn't be insulting them in the same breath.
Because, as you will see later, Samantha basically goes full biology denial and perpetuates an idea of sex that is fluid and not particularly meaningful. So what are the sexes then? What does equality between the sexes even mean? I mean, is she suggesting that
Yeah, she's just showing a complete disregard of what feminism actually is. It's called feminism because it's about uplifting women. You know what I mean? Ridiculous.
her idea of feminism means males and females treated exactly the same. We'll just have one prison for everybody, one Olympics for everybody, because that's not going to lead to very feminist outcomes, in my humble opinion. Now,
I don't know if she said that specifically.
I don't actually think that's what she believes, but when she says,
okay, well done.
Well, trans-inclusive and all this is part of feminism, because feminism just means equality, I don't think she's really grappling with the fact that in the case of gender and sex and the meaningful ways that humans are different along these metrics, equal doesn't in fact mean the same or mean without distinction, not in practice in society. And if you were to treat it that way, you would actually result in a lot of bad outcomes for women. And there are in fact good reasons for the distinctions. And
honestly, I think the other thing as to why there's more talk about trans people now than there used to be is just that we're pushing some very controversial things like inclusion in sports and transitioning children. I think honestly, if generally trans people were against those kinds of things, I don't think we'd be hearing half of what we are. I don't know that people would be panic voting like Donald Trump because they're terrified of the trans agenda to make all these what are they called? It's on the tip of my tongue. Executive orders. To make all these executive orders to ban all this kind of stuff. I don't think it had to go this way. And unfortunately, I can only look at the trans rights movement and say that a lot of that is their fault, honestly.
Segregation between the sexes in some contexts, that if you erode them in the name of trans acceptance or something, you are not in fact furthering feminism, or at least it can be very credibly argued as much. But apparently I'm just like all the other TERFs.
He's just like the other TERF, he really is. As you'll see throughout this entire video, he says it's...
Yeah, we love our vague, nondescript boogeymen, TERFs. Wow, well done. What are all the other TERFs like exactly?
Common sense. This is just common sense. It's just objective fact, and then provides no evidence, no sources, no data for the...
Mate, look at yourself when you talk about feminism. All you did was show a dictionary definition. That doesn't support your fucking claim.
Claims that he's making against trans people.
It's like these people, they look at a different dictionary definition. Oh, it says equality of all the sexes. I have to look at this further. I have to think about why it is that equality of all the sexes is called feminism specifically. I don't have to give a meaningful explanation of why I think anything I think. But then you point it at other people, they do, apparently.
can't combat you if you provide no evidence. It's like you saying the sky is green and then being like, well, I don't know. I just think that. I just think that it's obviously green.
So it's kind of wild to me that my statements like, keep biological male sex offenders out of women's prisons. She's like, source? Do you have stats on that? No, some things are just common sense, though I actually do have stats on all of it, which we will get into. And it's funny that this critique is coming from Samantha because, as you will see, Samantha is not very statistically literate. But I just love the idea that, like, me acknowledging the fact that there are two human immutable sexes is comparable to saying the sky is green. Right.
I know someone that literally referred to like Matt Walsh as like a TERF, which is bizarre. To be fair, Brad might be a feminist. I'm not sure. He hangs out with that Ariel Scarcella. Is she a feminist? I need to think about that, actually. I haven't watched her in a while.
Yeah, totally.
He also does this thing, as do a lot of other anti-trans grifters.
All the previous reaction videos. I watched his initial video because it was like a month ago. I didn't watch Samantha's video. I'm just seeing the little bits that are here. I don't know. I don't think I've taken anything out of context so far. Obviously, bear in mind, there might be further bits to this that are not being shown, but I don't know. I can always check, and if there's that much wrong, then I can correct, because that's what we do. We say things that are wrong now and just snidely correct them as an aside, you know?
Of relying on this manipulative language of biological male, right? It's a conservative dog whistle, or I shouldn't say conservative, it's an...
Yeah, this is like an instant F. This is an instant fail. If you're going to say that something like biological male is a dog whistle, when it's clearly being used to refer to your sex, which you would say sex and gender are different, then you're just kicking yourself in the crotch needlessly. You just sound insane when you say stuff like that. It's like if I was to say human being is a dog whistle. You know what I mean? Like, what a stupid thing to say. Why are people still trying to boycott JK Rowling? Honestly, I think these people need someone to point at. I think these people... This is something Brianna Wu actually said on Chud Logic's stream like ages ago, saying that part of the reason for the hate campaign against JK Rowling specifically is she's a symbol for everything that these people hate. And because she's outspoken and well-known, she's a very easy target, you know what I mean? Me personally, I think they should have given up this stupid fucking war against JK Rowling years ago. We should have been treating her like Katie Hopkins or someone like that, where for ages, the left-wing media would go on about this Katie Hopkins person because she'd say like crazy right-wing shit that would offend people. And the left-wing media every single time are like, oh my God, look what this crazy person said this time. And what they're actually doing is just giving this person more publicity, like giving them more notoriety. And then these fucking outlets suddenly start being like, you know what, we're going to stop talking about Katie Hopkins. It's like, that's what you should have been fucking doing all along. I feel exactly the same way about JK Rowling. The difference is, now that I look at it, she was actually right about a bunch of stuff. And what she was saying initially was actually quite mild. Nowadays it's a bit different, but I can't really blame someone that's been like harassed for like 5 years straight for ending up a bit extreme, you know? It's a little bit difficult for me to like shit on someone for that.
Anti-trans dog whistle.
Biological male is a anti-trans dog whistle.
Yeah, if you say that out loud and it sounds really stupid, maybe just don't say it. Maybe just don't say it. You sound insane. You sound paranoid.
I don't really have words. Like, how do you engage with somebody who wants to label facts as hate and then say that you're not allowed to say hate facts? A fact cannot be hate.
I mean, this is what they've been doing for ages though, right? This is what they've been doing for a really long time.
I don't know what to say, Samantha. I don't know what to say. That is astoundingly bad faith to say that referring to trans women as biological males because they are biological males is hateful or like part of a grift or anything like that. It's not. It's just true. Something that's true cannot be something that is also verboten and you're not allowed to say because it makes you a hateful grifter. At least not if you're interested in open and honest conversation that brings us closer to the truth.
What he's referring
Hi, Stevie. I hope you're good.
to is trans women. And just as a matter of fact, and like a legitimate fact, trans women are different than just a simple biological man. Your average
You're still male though.
cisgender man. Not only
You're different because you've modified your body. That's the same as saying a man that had his penis chopped off by a jealous lover or something is different from a man. Like, yeah, that is, I guess, true. But they're still male, ultimately.
only are we socially different, not only are we like emotionally different, but a lot of times we're anatomically different, right? Saying that I'm just...
Yes, but like artificially so. The whole point is that you still took one of the two pathways. You still developed as a male and not as a female.
a biological male being put into like whatever...
A man with Klinefelter syndrome is biologically a bit different on average from a man without Klinefelter syndrome. They're still both men. You know what I mean?
system, you're like avoiding a large chunk of reality, my guy.
Samantha, I am not the one who is avoiding a large chunk of reality. I never...
Like, what's annoying is like, it's not what she's saying is wrong. Is that it lacks any kind of depth whatsoever. What it comes across like is, well, trans women aren't the same as men. And that's just the end of the conversation. Well, it's like, well, you're also nothing like women. You're more like a man than a woman in most respects. You've changed your hormone levels. You might have had surgery, etc., to more resemble a woman. But you're still male. Every cell in your body is still what it is. You still followed the developmental pathway you did. If you hadn't changed your body, you would still be the one impregnating, not the one being impregnated. And you will never become the one being impregnated. I don't think that's ever happening. Like womb transplants and shit, I don't think that's ever going to happen. And the only way it'd work is if you were on puberty blockers and didn't have the kind of narrowing of your pelvis. Because like, how are you going to like have a baby? Like, how would I have a baby through like my hips? They're way too narrow. Recently, Sam has been giving vibes to me. He's realizing the tide is turning. I'm waiting for him to jump ship, but he won't till he has to, just trying to shave his own ass. That could be true, yeah. There is the occasional. Samantha Lux is not actually the worst when it comes to like TRA content creators. Like, there are occasionally glimpses of this person understanding that you can't just like brute force your way through anymore. You can't just blank deny anything that evades your worldview, you know? Within the year, I think Sam Lux will have turned on non-binary. Hey, maybe. Listen, I'll be looking out for it. I'll see what happens.
Never claimed that trans women are the exact same thing as men. I claim that they are biologically male because according to the definition of sex, which is the structure of your reproductive system, whether it's oriented towards the production of sperm.
Yeah, this kind of brings me back to the thing that Arden was doing on the line with that Jib guy that is in my chat sometimes. Where it's like, oh, you shouldn't call us TRAs, you should call us trans activists. Well, it's like trans rights activists. TRA, trans activist. You're just saying call me basically the same thing. One of these things that is exactly the same thing is offensive somehow and like a dog whistle. It's like, well, when referring to your sex, if someone calls you biologically male, that isn't like, it's just silly. It's silly. You are a biological male, so am I, it's fine. What is a TRA? TRA stands for Trans Rights Activist.
Or ova, and I'll provide receipts on that later, they are male. And then the things that go...
TRA is kind of used by like TERFs and gender criticals and anyone else that's not like overwhelmingly pro-trans, kind of in a similar way to how like those trans rights activists use words like TERF, you know what I mean?
Along with that are secondary sex characteristics, which can be modified, but don't...
So the thing is, these people, if they want to say that TRA is like a slur or something, which I have heard, which this Arden person has literally said, and people listen to the line, people hang on these people's words, that means that TERF is also a slur. They have to accept that.
Actually mean you've changed your sex. And I love how she brings up socially or emotionally, we're not the same as biological men, but we're not talking about socially anything or emotionally anything. We're talking about biology.
I mean, socially, kind of depends how you present yourself, how you act and stuff. You go around saying you're a woman, but you look like a man, sound like a man, act like a man. Like socially, yeah, you're just another man, ultimately.
In the name, biological male. I do, of course, agree that trans women are different in tons of different ways than, you know, a random guy off the street. And that's true, that is meaningful and should be taken into account in some scenarios. But I have to say that people like Samantha have never articulated a standard by which we could allow them to enter women's spaces and do other sorts of things where I honestly don't think most people would be particularly uncomfortable with that wouldn't also just allow fetishists with beards who want to go into women's only spas and walk around with their penis exposed to do the same thing.
I mean, if I had to guess, I would say maybe someone like Sam Lux would want people to kind of use their better judgment. Oh, is this person trying to look like a woman even if they're not entirely succeeding? Maybe they're fine. But the problem is, you're trying to tell women how their own spaces should be, and as a male person, it's optically not great to do that. And if you're going to also tell people how they should be a feminist based on literally a dictionary definition that they found on Google in 5 seconds, it's starting to paint the picture of someone who maybe they do want to dominate women in some way. That's how it comes across. I'm not saying she actually does, but I think too many of these people, there's always a problem if you care way too much about optics. Someone like Brianna Wu, who also at the same token is extremely unself-aware. So whatever optics they think that they're doing, it just isn't working. It can definitely be cancerous to like care too much about optics and focus on that too much. But I think a lot of these TRA types, they need to at least think about optics a little bit. At least think about the implications of some of what they say, you know what I mean?
Like, what's the standard or the process that you're articulating that would allow us to have one without the other? Because when you ask these people to drill down on it, well, what does it mean that you're a woman? They just say, well, how I feel inside, with no verification, even in her long video.
Actually, Papagut said that it wasn't about feelings, although actually later on he also said it was about feelings, so never mind.
I don't think I clipped this out, but she says, like, we can't even expect trans women to want to pass. And if they want to have big muscles and beards, that's fine. Like, so there's really no standards here whatsoever. So you're simultaneously claiming that we trans women...
Listen, I don't have a clip of her saying that, but if she has said that, then that is a bit of a mess. You do need to, in fact, work out your worldview and make sure that it is, in fact, inclusive of women and that you actually listen to women. Like, to me, at best, if I'm a woman in any way, shape or form, as a trans woman, you know, I'm like a guest, you know what I mean? I'm not the one that should be telling other women, or telling women, sorry, how their shit should be. I think that would be kind of offensive for me to do. Because, I mean, how long have women been under the thumb of men in history? It's fairly recent that they got a lot of their rights, things like right to vote and so on. So to me personally, I feel like I should take a backseat in that kind of thing. But not enough other trans people seem with me on that one, unfortunately.
Men are very different from biological males, so excluding us doesn't make sense, but also that none of those ways in which we are different are actually required to be a trans woman. You see how that's actually inconsistent? And I don't like this thing that Samantha does, where she pretends to be open to actual conversations about these topics, but then passes up opportunities with people like me for a civil conversation and belittles people like...
Unfortunately, anyone like this, they'll just make an excuse of, oh, well, you're a transphobe, oh, well, you're going to be bad faith. So, like, I don't know. I don't think you can win with a lot of these people, honestly.
Like JK Rowling, who are literally domestic abuse survivors, comparing her to Andrew Tate, an alleged abuser of women, because she also smoked a cigar. Yeah, the math there is non-mathing.
We can have these...
Oh my god, the Andrew Tate thing. I don't think that was even her take. So many people were spreading that shit. I think someone made that take on Twitter and all these people just stole it, to be honest. I don't think she came up with that herself. And it's retarded. JK Rowling is not like Andrew Tate. Like, come on. If everyone who smokes a cigar is like Andrew Tate, then there's broader problems going on, you know?
Conversations about legitimate concerns for women's safety, because I do think, obviously, that women's safety is of utmost importance. Like I said, I do not think that sexual offenders should be put into open population with other...
And here's the other problem. There's this, like, ignorance that I think runs on both sides to an extent, but I'm especially seeing on this side, where these people just seem very closed to any new information. They don't seem to know about, like, for example, the proportion of, like, trans incarcerated people, like male-born trans people that are incarcerated, that are sex offenders, how much higher it is than even the male population. They don't seem able to accept that in some cases, like, sexual assault statistics is about your sex. It's really not about your gender. Too many of these people want to throw men under the bus whilst keeping trans women in a little separate category along with women and trans men, who are just much less likely to offend in certain ways, when it doesn't work to do so, and the stats don't bear out that way. But it's like trying to get these people to understand, like, reality is just, I don't know, where do you start? They don't get exposed to a lot of this information, and when they do, there's some kind of knee-jerk reaction, it feels. Like when we're watching that Papagut thing, him listening to King Critical for what was clearly the first time ever. There's an awful lot of stuff that, because he's like a trans ally, he just doesn't know about. And his reaction, instead of, oh, I've never heard of that, let me look that up, see what I can find about that. Oh no, that's not happening, I've never heard about that. It's like, it's very difficult. I don't know.
other cisgender women. I've made myself clear on that. He chooses to ignore it. That's fine, whatever, it's fine. But he's also offering no feasible solutions to these problems that he's bringing up. And that's where it becomes sinister, right? If you just kick.
Well, no, they're offering solutions. Use men's facilities, etc., etc. Or maybe, if he's more like me, you might be alright in the women's toilet in like a shopping centre. Just go in, go out, don't do anything, don't draw attention to yourself. But you don't like those solutions. It's not about offering solutions. It's about offering solutions that you are happy with. But all you are happy with is full, unquestioning inclusion into what it means to be a woman. And unfortunately, you're not a woman, so that doesn't work. And that doesn't work for other people whose feelings are more important. Like me, I would say no one's. So you need to start compromising, right?
Trans women out or just say that they cannot enter women's prisons, period, and do not provide a different place for them to go at least, you're basically signing them up.
And the other thing is, if we're still talking about the UK Supreme Court thing, in the interim guidance, it made clear that there still needs to be provisions for trans people. And more places are putting in third spaces.
For men's populations and doing harm to them.
So this is just bad faith because she's ignoring that I have said over and over again, I don't think legitimate trans women should be placed in men's prisons. I think there should be an LGBT.
He's being more woke than I am here, hang on.
Doing harm to them.
So this is just bad faith because she's ignoring that I have said over and over again, I don't think legitimate trans women should be placed in men's prisons.
Yeah, first off, I could 100% buy that she's literally only ever seen this piece of content and is judging him off of it, which is not right to do. You shouldn't really speculate on someone's positions. And if you are, make clear that you're speculating if you don't really know much about that person. Like, that's why I try, like, when someone mentions, oh, Sam Lux said this and that in the past, if I haven't heard her say that, then I'd rather not take that as gospel, you know what I mean? But like, more than that, like, he's actually more on her side than mine on this. I don't think male people should ever really be in like women's prisons. Like, how do you determine who's a legitimate trans person, who isn't? People will use people like Isla Bryson. People will use people like Isla Bryson who commit a crime and then come out as trans and say, well, you can't be a real trans. But it's like, based on your logic, how can you say that? So because someone's committed a particular offense, they're not trans? But what if someone was already trans and you already accepted them as trans and then they committed that offense? Are they no longer trans? Is your gender identity beholden to whether you've done X or Y bad thing? That doesn't make any sense to me. So I actually disagree with Brad here, to be honest. He's more in line with Samantha than I am.
I think there should be an LGBT ward created in the federal prison system and in state prison systems so they can be accommodated in a third.
Okay, a third separate ward. I guess that's a bit more reasonable than I was suggesting.
Space without inflicting biological male criminals into women's prisons where some.
I think what I would counter that with is like, why do some males get to run off to the third space and some don't? Trans women are more at risk of like assault, like sexual assault stuff in men's prisons. But they're not the only group that are. But they're the only group that gets to run off to the women's and not have to deal with that shit. And in some cases, sexually assault women themselves, you know? So I don't know. The problem is trans has become so meaningless. So it's like, how do you make any differentiation with anyone ever anymore? Because now anyone, if they think that it's going to give them a better outcome, is going to start saying they're trans, you know? They're in prison anyway. Might as well.
Of course, not all, but some of them will go on to harm women. So I have proposed.
Anyone listen to Sam's podcast? I have not.
An alternative. And what I'm curious about is how Samantha explains or articulates the standard that, well, I don't support, sex offenders who are trans women going into women's prisons. Why not, though? They're women. According to you, they're women. Trans women.
Well, they victimized other women. But then the logic doesn't entirely work, because if a woman victimizes another woman, they still get sent to a women's jail, ultimately.
Women are women, so they should be in the women's prison. How do you explain that? How do you square that circle? I'm honestly curious. Samantha also just
should have all been campaigning to make men's prisons violently unsafe. Well, I mean, yeah, I guess. Like, obviously it's utopian. Obviously, you get people being like, oh, well, you should just teach men not to, like, do this, that, and the other. And it's very utopian. At the same time, like, I think that pushing more to get more acceptance for, like, gender nonconformity, especially within, like, males, I think that would have been a better idea than pushing for, like, trans kids and, like, sports and stuff.
Just didn't really appear to like do very much research.
Isla Bryson, probably hiding behind the trans umbrella for an easy ride. Female gender identity and rape don't go together for me. Well, that's the thing though, like, sometimes trans women do commit those kinds of offenses. Are they no longer valid because of that offense? Like, is that the measure by which someone is or isn't legitimately trans? I just think it's a bit hypocritical. Like, I don't know. I don't think it's a good way of separating those people. I think it's a matter of safety. Same reason pedos and cops go to their own wing. Legitimate trans women, hard to define, no, are straight up more at risk. But isn't that the same for like effeminate gay guys and stuff? Do they get to put in their own wing? But then listen, if someone's going to suggest, we'll put the trans women in a separate wing, ultimately I don't really have a problem with that.
Search before making this video, which is funny because she released it like weeks and weeks after mine. So it's not even like she did it quickly, and she still didn't exactly go above and beyond in the scope of her research and preparation.
He then goes on to say, like, we should just have LGBT shelters. Just go to like a co-ed shelter, and that's problem solved. You don't need to be in these spaces. First of all, I don't think there is such a thing as a co-ed shelter, right?
Surely there are unisex shelters. Okay, AI Overview is saying so. Surely when you get shelters, you'll get some that are unisex and some that are just for women, bearing in mind women are much more likely to need them than men. Emergency housing. The Outside Project. Emergency housing. Like, some of these are going to be for women and some aren't. Surely. Like, the problem is men are much less likely to use one of them.
I don't know if that's a thing. Second of
Well, what if they are? If they were a thing, would you be okay with that? Or are you just going to ignore that?
all, it is a false solution to say, just go to your own space when there aren't any spaces that exist. Like, okay, but in the
There aren't any spaces that exist. So the only shelters that exist are either for women or for men specifically. I just don't think that's true.
meantime, what about the trans woman that's trying to escape a domestic violence situation? Too bad, so sad? Is that your response?
So Samantha,
Well, the hope is there's still places they can go. It's just probably not going to be the female-only one because they're not female. Would you say the same about like a man?
Google is free. There are
YMCA is for men and women. Okay, I think he's going to explain as well. Because that's the problem. Oh, well, there aren't any, so I don't have to answer the question. That's not good enough. Like, if you don't know whether there are or not, fine.
You're
Then
anti-trans.
just deal with the question in concept. Just deal with whether you think they should go to, like, mixed-sex spaces or not. Hi, Ria A. Thanks for following.
plenty of domestic abuse shelters that are open to both men and women, meaning trans women could go to them with no issue. According to domestic shelter.
Yeah, like, at the very least, why wouldn't you take the assumption that there are these and then answer the question? But you won't do that. It's like, well, what's an excuse for me to not actually deal with the question and thus not actually give a take? You know what I mean? I hate that kind of shit. It's very cowardly.
Shelters.org, 86.9% of the programs that have completed their profiles for this organization say they welcome male victims of domestic abuse. So lots of shelters accept both males and females, so trans people can just go to those. Just maybe.
And the other thing is, what if you go to a women's shelter and they assume you're a woman and let you in and there's no problem? Then I don't know, I guess it's fine. Many of these shelters also rent hotel rooms for people. Yeah, it sounds like there's options.
If you're a trans woman, don't specifically go to the one in.
Like, there's been big fights over women having, like, some of their own shelters. I think there was stuff in Scotland. Wasn't there a women's shelter that was, like, literally run by a trans woman, and there were all kind of issues? And, like, in Canada, I think, that Morgan Oga, or whatever her name is, like, got a rape center, like, defunded because it was, like, single sex or something. Like, I don't know, man.
10 shelters, apparently, that is intended exclusively for females. I don't think that's too much to ask. And the text she put on screen saying separate but equal, question mark, comparing this to Jim Crow is absurd. Not having biological.
Yeah, Jesus. Wouldn't even say that with a fucking chest. Has to put it in a little aside on the text. What ghoul. You're not black. You don't have that experience. You don't have an ancestry of people that were forced to do a whole lot of stuff different than white people. I think you should probably pipe the fuck down on those kinds of things. I have a feeling that black people find it very annoying when trans people, like, co-opt their struggles, you know?
Biological males in spaces for traumatized females when there's plenty of other spaces for them to go to is not the same thing as forcing Rosa Parks to sit in the back of the bus because she's black. And I'm hardly the woke crowd, but kind of seems genuinely insensitive and belittling to the struggles of the civil rights era to make such an absurd comparison. Now we get into the part where Samantha really did not like what I had to say. Beginning of this clip, trans women are not men really defines on what your definition of man is. Technically, if you're defining man as an adult human male, then trans women are men. That
Dog whistle. Really, bro?
definition of man is. Technically, if you're defining man as an adult human male.
So adult human male is now also a dog whistle. Like, do you see how pathetic this is? Let's just start calling everything a dog whistle. Let's start calling anything that might give any sense of clarity to anything we're saying ever as a dog whistle. And then we're forced to talk in vague terms like these people want us to. This is retarded. You lose the argument instantly when you make these very common, very logical statements into dog whistles. Like, you're just unhappy with your sex. Just fucking accept it and understand that's not everyone else's problem. Instead of making out that other people are like far rightists, that people are dog whistling because they say some uncomfortable truth. This is pathetic.
Then trans women are men. That is just a fact. Not her labeling me reading the dictionary definition of man a dog whistle.
Yeah. The dictionary definition of feminism earlier wasn't a dog whistle.
Dictionary is a dog
Oh, hi, Zachary Grove. Thanks for watching.
whistle now. How do you even engage with this when you're not allowed to recite a definition without being accused of bigotry? Because it is.
Very simply, you're insane, you are paranoid, you are making your own side look fucking insane.
It is an indisputable fact that trans women are biological males. I'm happy to let them live life in many ways as women if that's what will make them happiest. I'm happy to refer to them with preferred pronouns.
Are you even listening? Well, I suppose you're not. You probably already watched it before. But like all this just stop. What are you doing?
Live life in many ways as women if that's what will make them happiest. I'm happy to refer to them with preferred pronouns and names within reason.
What a sweetie pie.
I'm not calling anybody's these are too bad. But sex is defined by the structure of your reproductive system. And trans women, in almost all cases, have reproductive systems oriented towards the production of sperm.
Don't talk about my reproductive system, sir. There's a few things that I want to give my opinion on. The first of which is...
Yeah, what was it? What reproductive system did you have before any kind of surgeries, any kind of modification? Don't talk about my reproductive system? Well, yeah, literally. That's the exact reason why you're making out that adult human male is a dog whistle. Because you don't want people to, like, acknowledge your biological reality, or what was.
He says that because men are defined as adult human males, then therefore trans women who are biologically male are men. I see the
Yes, that's exactly right.
logic, I get it. I understand that's not my opinion. Let me share mine. So first, let me talk about this idea that sex is defined solely by your reproductive system.
It is. Sex is your reproductive role. That's what males and females are. What's a male dog versus a female dog? Any mammal you care to mention. It's about their reproductive role.
That is just not the case. That is not true. Sex is actually defined by a combination of factors, including your reproductive system, yes, including your chromosomes, yes, but it also includes things like your hormone levels. It includes things like your primary and secondary sex characteristics.
No, those are results of your following this pathway or that pathway. Those are part of your development, but it's because you develop that way that you have this or that hormone level. It's because of that pathway that you'll typically develop facial hair, or you'll typically develop breasts. You can't really use like hormones as a definer for sex, because you're going to get people with naturally different levels of hormones. You're going to get women with PCOS, who have like high testosterone because of their condition, who might get facial hair, meaning that facial hair is not really a sex trait. It's far more likely to appear on a male than a female, but it can appear on both. You can be a man and develop breasts because you got fat. You know what I mean?
Characteristics. It's actually a much bigger picture than what Brad is trying to levels. It includes things like your primary
Defines biological sex, assigned sex. Jesus Christ, this is like captured as fuck. Multi-dimensional biological construct based on anatomy, physiology, genetics, and hormones. But like, it's about which pathway you follow. All of this stuff kind of follows on. You don't just see the condition of one and the other and think every single thing about that person has equal weight in their sex. That's not true. You followed a pathway. There's a reason why things like genetics matter, but overwhelmingly it's XY or XX. There's a reason for that.
primary and secondary sex characteristics. It's actually a much bigger picture than what Brad is trying to make it seem like, which is because he is trying to make it seem like something so simple. Duh, if you're born...
No, that's not what he's trying to do. He's accurately defining it as your reproductive role.
...with a penis, then you're male.
Like, why do you think it is? Like, overwhelmingly, what's the difference between males and females? It's going to be that one of them has testicles, one of them has ovaries. There's other differences, yeah. More likely, someone is going to grow breasts if they're female. More likely, someone is going to grow facial hair if they're male. But those aren't constant. What is constant is the gonads, the gametes you produce. Those are the constant differences, not likely differences. So why would you put the same weight into secondary sexual characteristics or hormone levels, which can be altered by all sorts of things, as you would gamete production? It makes the most sense to base it around which reproductive role you have, or should have. Or
I am no longer asking. Sign the f up.
And if you're male, then you're a boy. Duh.
Well, actually, no, I didn't hang my definition upon genitalia because there are actually rare outlier examples. I hung my definition, and I'll link to this in the show notes, but I used the definition of biological sex that actually dates back to the 19th century and has been historically used in biology textbooks, and that is the gamete-based definition of male and female. I understand that a lot...
Yeah, the thing is, why do we need to expand that to mean other things? What's the need for that? Is it to include trans people? So once again, are we basing sex around a tiny amount of people who most of the time can't even reproduce anyway? That seems a bit moronic.
A lot of ideologically captured medical organizations will now give incoherent definitions of sex that you can find on Google that Samantha recited there, like the idea that your sex is defined by your hormone levels.
Yeah, think of it another way. Why is it that only females can ever get pregnant? Why is it that only males can ever impregnate? Isn't that the main difference?
Which isn't true. I mean, people who are male and female can have very different hormone levels. It doesn't mean they're not male and not female. Or the idea that like going under the knife and surgically changing your genitalia changes your...
Yeah, I have the same problem with Samantha's definition of sex as I do the definition of someone's gender being like their gender identity and whether it matches their sex or not. It's built around a very tiny amount of people to satiate their feelings. Like all this like assigned sex and stuff. That doesn't actually apply to 99.95% of the population, if not more. Yeah, that's the language used for literally everyone. You're assigned sex at birth. These people don't seem to understand how many concessions have been made for their benefit when they were a tiny amount of the population. And we shouldn't be basing theories of gender and sex around trans people. That's nuts.
Your sex. That's also not true. These are all secondary sex characteristics. I've been over this in interviews with...
Yeah, I'll be honest. I don't know that Samantha Lux. I don't think I've ever seen her talk to someone that disagrees. I don't think she ever would. And I don't know that it would go well if it did. These kinds of people, I'm not saying Samantha Lux because I don't think she comes across as intelligent. Some of them kind of manage to come across as intelligent in their like prepared content. And sometimes they're like philosophy tube or ContraPoint, so they probably didn't even write most of it. But like when you get them like more candid, it just doesn't work, you know what I mean? Being on a tangent, but it does seem like an effeminate man can be placed into a vulnerable prisoner unit in a men's prison in order to protect him from rape, abuse, etc. Got to go to a panel for review though. Okay, fair enough. Listen, I'm not against separating out certain kinds of people. I think being able to put them in the women's is kind of another story. But I think I get what you're saying.
With my friend, evolutionary biologist Colin Wright, and he has extensively documented the scientific consensus that this is the actual definition of biological sex is based on sperm or egg gametes. There is no third gamete. No one can ever go from being oriented towards the production of one towards being oriented towards the production of the other. It has never...
Yeah, I've made this point before. If you're trans, you can nullify your sex, as in like what I've done. Like, I don't have any genitalia anymore. You can't actually take on the other reproductive role. So how can you change sex?
Never happened. Isn't possible in humans. It is possible.
But what the difference ultimately is, they just classify these things differently. So I don't know if there's ever a resolution to this whole thing. It's just that most people are going to still follow the conventional wisdom ultimately.
In other species, but that's not really relevant to humans. And then there is this constellation of traits that are very closely associated with those structures and the two types of human beings, but they don't define it. I actually don't blame Samantha for...
Yeah, could you not, for example, get a woman with kind of narrow hips? Could you not get a man who has gynecomastia even though he's not overweight? There's a reason why you don't give secondary sex traits the same weight as gonads, for example.
Not knowing any of this, though, because I have a feeling she inhabits an echo chamber where these kinds of ideas just aren't expressed. And then when she does a cursory Google search, she does find these like ideologically captured organizations, the APA and other things, that have an activist redefinition of sex. Yeah, I mean,
here's another problem. Google, I think, tends to give you the kind of things that are in line with what you already look at. I think. I mean, I can't, don't like quote me on this. I'm still working out what's going on here, but like, I can see how someone like this might Google something and Samantha Lux might Google something and they might get quite different results, you know?
I understand how she could come to these confused conclusions. I mean, she seems to believe that she is not male.
I'm not going to argue that I wasn't born male. I absolutely was. But I would make the argument that I'm not entirely male anymore.
How can you be not entirely male? So let's say part of you is male. What is the rest of you? Female? How are you female in any way? If you were to take a man and give him hormones every day without his knowledge, or let's say with his knowledge, and he has a specific condition where he needs to change his hormonal balance and it happens to resemble more a females than a males on average, there's still a man. If you cut a man's penis off, he's still a man. What you really mean is like identity, but identity isn't sexed because it can't be. Sex is a material reality. So this person is still male, I'm sorry to say.
I would make the argument that I'm entirely female now, but I'd make the argument that I'm not entirely male anymore. I would make the argument that I'm entirely.
Okay, so literally this person thinks that they are part female now. You can't be a mixture of male and female. There has never been anyone that I'm aware of. I've seen the odd anecdote of someone that could produce both gametes, but I've never seen any convincing cases of it happening.
Female now, but I'd make the argument that I'm maybe somewhere in between.
You can make that argument, but it's just not factual.
Like, where in between? What percentage male, what percentage female? What defines what percentage you are male or female? If a man has gynecomastia, is he 10% female? If a woman has PCOS and grows facial hair, is she 10% male? How does this work? It kind of implies, if you're going to bring up secondary sex characteristics, that maybe those are the kind of things that inform that. If a woman's hormonal balance is out of whack, she doesn't start becoming more male because of it.
Actually true. You are biologically male. You present yourself as a woman. You're totally free to do that. I think it's fine. It's part of freedom. Live however you want. Whatever will make you happy. You can modify your secondary sex characteristics, but by the gametes-based definition of sex, which is the reigning definition in biology, you are and always will be technically male. And
yeah, does Samantha Lux think there is any mechanism by which she could become 100% female one day? I wonder.
There's nothing wrong with that. Biology isn't oppressive, and we shouldn't be framing it that way because it's something we can't change and can't control. There's no such thing, I mean, with the exception of extremely rare intersex conditions, as somebody who's somewhere in between. Just changing your exterior appearance or your hormone levels doesn't change the fundamental structure of your entire body down to the cellular level. And remember when I said Samantha isn't very statistically literate? Yeah, we're about to get to that part.
Does my guy even know what rhetoric is? Perpetuating dialogue that trans women are not women while simultaneously...
It's honestly quite sad watching this person try and condescend to someone else. Like, you're too dumb for this. Don't do that. Just talk normally.
Making fun of their appearance and making fun of their actions even on Twitter does contribute to negative rhetoric. And hateful rhetoric is largely at fault for hate crimes. I mean, that's just kind of common.
What?
While simultaneously making fun of...
And remember when I said Samantha isn't very statistically literate? Yeah, we're about to get to that part.
Does my guy even know what rhetoric is? Perpetuating dialogue that trans women are not women while simultaneously making fun of their appearance and...
Wait, so you're saying that by itself then, calling a trans woman not a woman isn't actually a problem. You're saying it's in tandem with also making fun of their appearance and stuff. I mean, I don't know, bro. Does that mean that every time a kid in a playground makes fun of the appearance of another kid, that they're contributing to hateful rhetoric? I just think we need to like man up over this kind of shit. I'm sorry. People make fun of each other's appearance on Twitter sometimes. Yeah, like, Twitter's a fucking cesspool. What do you expect?
Making fun of their actions even on Twitter does contribute to negative rhetoric. And hateful rhetoric is largely at fault.
What does that even mean? Does contribute to negative rhetoric, which contributes to hate crime. Like, that's the most nebulous shit.
For hate crimes. I mean, that's just kind of common sense, isn't it? If we want to...
What's a hate crime? Hate crimes can mean literal assault. Hate crimes can also mean misgendering.
Use his terminology, but to compare that to what I said,
And like you keep hearing this, like she's like trying to laugh when she's speaking. That is like ultimate cope, in my opinion. You sound like you're laughing because you don't actually know what you're saying, and you don't actually know how to counter what you're saying. But you want to make it sound ridiculous.
I mean, that's just kind of common sense, isn't it? If I want to use his terminology. But to compare that to what I said about JK Rowling, my joke about how I like to see old hags choke, I mean...
Yeah, no, you're doing the same thing. You're doing the same thing. In fact, that sounds like violent rhetoric to me. What's the difference?
Wasn't trying to be ageist, I swear. Don't like to see people choke
Well, you literally were. If you didn't want to be ageist, then why say that?
ever. Not
Then why say that, you fucking retard? Why say any of that? Well, I don't actually want old people to choke. I just called someone an old hag and said it's good when they choke. Like, don't say that shit then. If you don't think that, then why say it? What's gonna happen? Let's say I'm not racist, but I go up to a black person and call them the N-word. People are gonna think I'm racist, even though I think I'm not racist. So, like, the best way to not come across as racist would be to not say that, right? Like, this is basic.
calling for violence in any sort of way, but God forbid
Well, it sounds like you were, actually. You can't just say, oh, well, I wasn't, so okay. Like, that's not how people are gonna see it.
I make a joke, right?
This clip
Like, should I say, I want to punch someone in the face? Oh, well, I'm not advocating for violence. I'm not saying I should be violent. What?
was wild to me because somebody needs to explain to Samantha what correlation means. This screenshot she Googled and then barely read and put up on screen from Brookings does not say that rhetoric directly causes hate crimes. It says that some sense of the problem can be traced by studies that show correlations between increases in hostile political rhetoric
Yeah, she's kind of exaggerating what point has actually been made on screen.
and violence. A correlation is not a causation, and it could just as easily be that a
Yeah, listen, if I was saying I would like to see Samantha Lux choke, would she see that as a joke? Would she be like, oh, okay, they're probably joking, I shouldn't take that seriously? Or would she see it as like a death threat? You know what I mean?
general rise in anger and hate results in both
Which is very convenient. I can run away to it being a joke whenever it's me under the spotlight. Oh, well, I can call out other people for saying trans women aren't women or making fun of their appearance. But when I do it, it's just a joke. Like, it's so retarded. Why even entertain that part of the video? If you can't deal with a point, just fucking ignore it. It'll make you look better, honestly.
rhetoric and crimes and contributes to both, and they are in correlation. What is not causing the other? I don't know how to explain basic statistics to you. I stand by my original point that it is absolutely impossible to draw a through line between rhetoric in general and any particular crime or incident, which in Samantha's original video, she tried to connect JK Rowling's tweets to some random horrible crime that happened in South America. Yeah, I stand by the idea that that is absurd and a total stretch, and nothing you've shown here proves anything otherwise. You also can't explain away by saying it's a joke. If you believe rhetoric causes violence, then you publicly bashing JK Rowling, calling her an old hag, saying she should choke, comparing her to a notorious criminal, by your own logic, you are fomenting violence or crimes against
Yeah, normally people on her side would be calling that like stochastic terrorism.
her. Again, I don't believe that, but you say you do. And it is insane to say that we can't state a fact that trans women are technically men without causing violence. If we state a fact and then some people choose to commit horrible crimes, that's not on us. Now, I do agree we shouldn't be making fun of people's appearances, and to the extent JK Rowling has done that, I don't support that. But what was this notion about making fun of trans women's actions? Aren't we allowed to criticize and mock people for their actions? Why would trans people be somehow exempt from that? I feel like that's
I'm guessing because intersectionality, but we're not intersectional here, so hey.
kind of the core essence of what we judge people on is their actions. Why would that be any different for trans people? Samantha is weaponizing tragic crimes to try to shut down dissent and smear her critics as if they're complicit in something they had nothing to do with and never endorsed. That is remarkably bad faith. And I have to be honest, I think Samantha knows that she doesn't really engage beyond a surface level in any of these issues and doesn't know a whole lot about any of these subjects, which is why she dodges live conversations with people with a different viewpoint and instead takes weeks to produce very short, very sloppy scripts that she
How often does she pose? And listen, I can buy that Samantha Lux writes her own stuff. I'm also pretty sure she's got a much higher sub count than her views suggest. But a lot of these channels, a lot of these like wokeoid trans channels have like fallen off like heavy. By the way, bear in mind, I haven't actually watched this whole thing. There might be stuff that's taken out of context. I appreciate that. Yeah, she doesn't post very often, like quite low effort. Listen, if she's making enough money to sustain herself, bearing in mind, usually these people, I can't see a Patreon actually, I'm surprised. Usually there would be. You can join. If she's making like enough to get by comfortably, then I can see why you wouldn't. Like if you don't want to post more than you want to, then fair enough. But like, my hope is these people wouldn't act like their shit is like high effort, like highbrow content. It really isn't. Isn't really not any more highbrow than something like what I'm doing. And I understand, I'm like the bottom of the pile. I'm a fucking React streamer. Like, it is low effort content. It is basically content farming yourself and other people at the same time. Yeah, I'd imagine she probably makes enough that she doesn't really have to post all that often. You watched her like 6 years ago. I think that was when she was a lot more famous. But yeah, I mean, 669k subscribers, like 17k. Okay, that's quite a low one, I guess. I guess the odd one that pops off, 13k. It's not amazing for that kind of number. Yeah, like all her stuff is like, this was big like years ago. I seem to remember, the thing I most remember is Samantha Lux for. I like Abbott and Preach. And like she made some video, I can't remember if she was calling them out or making some other insane claim that they jumped on, but that's mainly where I know Samantha Lux from.
She then reads into a camera. And that's why she wouldn't want to talk with me, even though, while I've challenged her very strongly, I don't actually think I've personally insulted or demeaned her in any real way.
Always down to entertain civil conversation, but when it comes down to just...
Okay, there's the lie. Always down to entertain civil conversation. Well, that's meaningless if you never actually have any civil conversations with people, or any conversations at all for that matter, with people that disagree. That has the weakness of you being the one deciding who's worthy of a civil conversation. You might just not decide that anyone is. And then in that case, are you not kind of showing yourself to be dishonest?
Calling me a man and making things up about the trans community. That's kind of where I check out.
So I never made anything up about the trans community, for sure. And the only...
Yeah, it's like, if you're going to make excuses constantly to not talk to people, then don't say things like, oh, I'm open to conversation. Like, no, you're not. So don't say that.
To the extent to which I only said that trans women are men, not to be hostile or rude, but just on a point of technical fact that's relevant to this.
Yeah, it's interesting how it's Samantha Lux saying to someone else, well, I can't trust you to be civil, so fuck you. When they're not entirely civil themselves, the way that they engage, so, okay.
Conversation. I'm not one of those people who goes up to trans people and reminds them...
I mean, is it civil to call someone a transphobe because they disagree with you? I would say not.
...of their biology aggressively just to be contrarian or to make them upset. I don't do that. But when you make factually incorrect claims on camera, people are going to challenge them. And
I believe transgender as a treatment option is unethical, causing people to lie about their sex. People lie about their sex whether or not they get trans treatment. You can get trans treatment and see it like objectively. Just see it as you being a male person who wants to feminize, and it's fine. I'm not like, I don't know, if you're an adult and you want to transition, I don't see a problem with that, really. As long as you can be decently sure that you're not going to go back on it, which ultimately at a certain point has to be down to yourself if you're an adult, because at that point, you're old enough to consent, you're old enough to be able to think about that kind of stuff. With kids, it's just a no-go for that reason.
And that's not beyond the pale of a civil conversation. And I would love to see one example of such a conversation you've actually engaged in.
Yeah, right? Who the fuck does she ever talk to? Who does she ever talk to, especially that disagrees with her?
As far as I can tell, you do not step outside your echo chamber very often at all. But what do you guys think? What did you think of this whole hot mess? And
there we go. Brad Polumbo versus Samantha Lux. I don't know. I'm very biased, bear in mind, because I generally agree with Brad Polumbo on stuff. I don't agree with Samantha Lux on almost anything. So, hey, listen. Take from that what you will.